Привет, братья и сестры. Я рад, что у меня есть опять шанс с вами вам говорить про Слово Божие. У меня сегодня очень интересная, тема. Спасибо. Тема, и я буду по-английски, извиняюсь опять. Русский не очень хороший, но я работаю под этим. Я буду начинать. Good evening, brothers and sisters. I remembered that it's evening this time and not morning again. So again, good evening, brothers and sisters. I'm very excited that I got the chance to talk today because the topic I picked today wasn't the original one I was going to go with tonight. But I decided on this because I heard about it and I didn't know much about it at first, but the more research I did on it, the more I looked into it, the more I read about it in the Bible. I feel like God really put this on my heart, on my soul, and I feel like I really should talk about this because I really haven't heard it talked in church before, and I really wanted to talk about it tonight. And so let's just get into it. Today I'm going to be touching on the subject of end times a little bit, but specifically focusing about this thing called the blood moon. Brothers and sisters, if you would please turn to Acts chapter 2, verse 17 is where we will start. Again, Acts chapter 2, verse 17, please. It says here, "In the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit upon all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. In those days I will pour out my spirit, even on my servants, men and women alike, and they will prophesy. And I will cause wonders in the heaven above and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and clouds of smoke. The sun will become dark and the moon will turn blood red before that great and glorious day of the Lord arrives. But everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." And now, if you wouldn't mind, right after, if we could turn to Joel chapter 2, starting at verse 30. Again, Joel chapter 2, starting at verse 30, please. Let's read here. "And I will cause wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun will become dark and the moon will turn blood red before that great and terrible day of the Lord arrives. But everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. For some on Mount Zion in Jerusalem will escape, just as the Lord has said. These will be among the survivors whom the Lord has called." If you notice these two passages are very similar. They're very similarly worded, almost the exact same. And when I read these two, I really thought God mentioned it once in the Old Testament, and then he said it again in the New Testament. And I feel like he's trying to bring it to our attention. It's something that we should really see, because it's almost the exact same wording, and I feel like we should really, look into this, that it's important if he's mentioned it twice. In the Bible, it tells us that God shows us signs in the sky and in the heavens. He shows us signs in the stars, in the moon, in the sun. For example, in the Bible, when Jesus was born, there was the Star of Bethlehem, that when he was born, it showed the three wise men where to go, and it signaled that Jesus was born, and that this is where they should be going, and that's where they will find Jesus. And God used the Star of Bethlehem as a sign for the wise men to know that, yes, Jesus was born, and that this is where they should be heading, and this is where they will find him. And that's just one example of how God has used signs to help people. Now, the blood moon that I mentioned earlier, what I was talking about, it's not some sort of magical thing just that pops up out of nowhere. It's not like a bloody moon. It's not literally blood. But the blood moon, in another way of saying it, is called a lunar eclipse. Now, a lunar eclipse is when the sun, the moon, and the earth all align in a perfectly straight line, and the sun from behind the moon casts a shadow over the moon, causing it to give off a blood red color. That's what a blood moon is. It's a lunar eclipse. It's nothing magical. It's not some sort of comes out of nowhere. It's a lunar eclipse. Over the last 500 years, according to NASA, the blood moon has appeared 3 times over the last 500 years. Once in 1492, 1948, and 1967. These are 3 important years and stuff. 3 years that were really important in the Israel and the Jewish history for them. And I'll go more in depth on each year later on in the sermon. But these have been the last 3 times that we've seen a blood moon in the last 500 years. And this year is the final time, according to NASA, that it is supposed to happen for the foreseeable future. We're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years that it should happen again, according to NASA. Now, some of you may think, well, okay, it's an interesting coincidence, blood moon, nothing special, just a different shade of the moon. We've seen it in different colors, I guess. But, that's what I kind of thought, too. It was nothing really that important, just something that was happening, like interesting science-wise. But then I looked more into it, and I thought about it more. And the Bible tells us God uses the heavens and the sky to show us signs, to show about things that are coming. And it can't be a coincidence that the blood moons in the last 3 years, that when they happened, they all fell on Jewish holidays. It started on the Passover festival, and it ended on the Festival of Tabernacles. These both are mentioned in the Old Testament plenty of times, and each of the 3 times, and this year when it's supposed to happen, it has started on Passover and ended on the Feast of Tabernacles. Now let's just get started looking at the first year when the first blood moon was seen. So according to NASA, it happened in 1492. Now you may ask, what's so important about 1492? Well, in 1492 there was something called the Spanish Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition was when the Spanish leaders and the Jewish people that were living in Spain, who most of the Jewish people were living in Spain at this time. They were being severely persecuted by the Spanish leaders and the Catholic Church there. They were being forced into converting to Catholicism, to the Catholic Church, but a lot of them, they wouldn't convert, and for that they paid the price. Thousands of them were killed, and they were asked to leave the country, to get out of the country in 14 days. They couldn't pack up anything, take any belongings or any riches that they owned. They were just told, you have 14 days and you need to leave the country. Now I just want to put that on pause for a second and go back to what I was talking about with the feasts, the 2 feasts that I mentioned, Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles. Now the first feast is called Passover, and that is when God took the Jewish people and helped them get away from the Egyptians through the blood of the Lamb. And the last feast, the Feast of Tabernacles, is about finding a habitation, kind of like a haven, a safe place where they won't be persecuted. They won't have to worry about worrying about religious rights. They can freely follow whatever the religion they want, and they will not be persecuted. And that's kind of what it means by habitation. Now, going back to 1492, when I was in school, when I was a little kid, when I learned about 1492, I heard this little saying, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. It talks about how Christopher Columbus, when the Jewish people were told to leave the country in the 14 days, they all headed to the Americas. And then this year, in 1492, that was when the Americas were discovered by Columbus, who in fact, a lot of Jewish people helped him in his when he went on his boat, when he was looking for the Americas. They financed and helped a lot so he could find a place for the Jewish people, so they were able to have their habitation, their haven. And a lot of them immigrated, moved to the Americas so they could have their religious freedom, so they wouldn't be persecuted anymore by the Spanish people. And when the persecution was happening in Spain, that was when the first blood moon was seen. Now let's move on to the second blood moon that happened. The second one was in 1948. Again, it appeared on the first appeared on Passover, and the last on the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, what happened in 1948? If you remember, in 1948, a couple years back, it was when World War II was going on. And World War II was where Hitler took all the Jewish people, a lot of the Jewish people. He put them in camps. He killed a lot of them. They were tortured, murdered. Their belongings were taken away. They just had nothing left. Hitler was trying to just get rid of completely, creating his perfect race, and he just hated the Jewish people, and he was just trying to get rid of them completely. And after all this, on the year 1948, after the World War II was over. In 1948, when the second blood moon appeared, the United Nations voted to give Israel a little piece of land, and they officially declared Israel as a nation. They were officially declared as a nation, and they got half of Jerusalem that year. Now, the nation of Israel is very small. It's a very small nation. It's not that big. And the three nations that surround it are Syria, Egypt, and Jordan. These are three nations that they don't like Israel. They hate Israel. In 1948, again, when they were declared a nation, Israel got the land, and it was declared officially a nation and got half of Jerusalem back. That's when the second blood moon appeared. Now going on to the third blood moon that appeared. It was in 1967, and this year is important because this is the year where there was something called the 6-Day War. Now the 6-Day War, it was when Syria, the three nations that surrounded Egypt, Syria, Egypt, and Jordan, they all attacked Israel from three different sides, trying to capture Israel. They were trying to just wipe out Israel, trying to get their land back, half of the Jerusalem, and they didn't want Israel there anymore. They wanted it back. They wanted to get rid of them completely. And so on the first day, when they attacked Israel, Israel was being defeated badly. Thousands and thousands and thousands of Israelites were being killed, and they were being pushed back farther and farther and farther, and their land was just getting taken away more and more. And on the second day, it continued. It was worse. They kept pushing on more and more and more, and more land was being taken away. But on the third day, at the end of the third day, the war changed hands. The battle changed hands. In this war, the Israelites were outnumbered 40-1. For every 40 soldiers that Syria, Egypt, and Jordan had, remember that they kind of joined forces in this, trying to take out Israel completely. But for every 40 soldiers that they had, there was one Israelite soldier. In reality, they should not have won this war. It should have been easy. They should have been wiped out, done, no more Israel, no more discussion. It should have been ended. But in the next 3 days, Israel pushed back. They fought back. They got their land back. They pushed Syria, Jordan, and Egypt all the way back. They recaptured their half of Jerusalem, and they captured the other half of Jerusalem. Officially, they have Jerusalem. Israel has Jerusalem, and they got even more land. So they made sure that something like this never happened again, and that they never lost Jerusalem again, because that's their land. That's Israel's land. That's the Jewish people's land, is Jerusalem. And what now they call it these days is the buffer zone. But that's the land that Israel won in this 6-day war. And again, at the end of this 6-day war is when the third blood moon appeared. And if you notice, these three blood moons, when they appeared, was every time I had something that involved Israel or the Jewish people or something along the lines of that. The first time it was persecution. The Jewish people were severely persecuted. And then they found new land where they had religious freedom. The second time it was after they were in World War II. Again, they were just killed off, trying to kill off the race completely. But then they got Israel, officially named a nation. And then in the third time, they won the battle, and they won back Jerusalem and all of it, and they had the whole nation. And these things that I'm saying right now isn't things that I've made up. I couldn't make this stuff up. Again, as I say, the first blood moon was on Passover. It happened during the Feast of Passover. And then the last one was during the Feast of Tabernacles. This isn't something I could have just made up and thought this was a cool idea to say in front of everyone. This is something it's in the Bible. It's in history. You can look it up. It's all in the history books. This all has happened before. Now the fourth blood moon, the final one that shouldn't happen again for the foreseeable future, hundreds and hundreds of years, is supposed to happen. It started last year. Again, the first one was on Passover last year in April. And the last one is supposed to be this year in September, again, during the Feast of Tabernacles. What I think, brothers and sisters, is that something will happen. I don't know what. I couldn't tell you what it is. But we should be prepared. Because as the Bible says, in the last days, God says, and he said all these things. And again, if we read back, the sun will become dark, and the moon will turn blood red before the great and glorious day of the Lord arrives. I believe that Jesus is coming soon, brothers and sisters. He is coming soon for his people, to bring us back to our Father who loves us. And again, I just have one question to ask all of you, brothers and sisters. Can you say that yes, my name is written in the book of life? That when Jesus comes in the hour that he comes, I will be ready to go up with him to heaven and spend eternity with our Father. Can you say yes to this? Or are you unsure of this? If there's any doubt, any doubt at all that you don't think that maybe my name isn't written in that book, maybe I'm not ready for Jesus to come and get me yet. You still have time, a little time, because Jesus is coming. It's coming really fast. He's coming really soon. He will be here before you know it, knocking at the door saying, I'm here. Let's go. It's time to see your Father. It's time to see our Father, be a family. There's still time left. You can change all of this in one prayer. And I would just like to say thank you again for hearing me out for what I have said. I thought this was really, really interesting. I've never really heard it preached before. And I thought it would be a really good idea to tell everyone about it because I think it's a really significant topic that isn't discussed too much. But yet, we should be aware of it because I truly believe that our Lord is coming soon for us. Jesus is coming soon. And if you would please join me in a prayer, если мы можем помолиться. Кто желает, пожалуйста, помолитесь, и я закончу. Дорогой Господь, спасибо, Ты сохранял этот час, что мы могли прийти в Твой дом, Дом Божий, Господи, слушать Твое Слово. Господи, помоги нам, чтобы мы были готовы, когда Ты придешь, что мы не спали, как бы сказать, когда Ты придешь. Господи, пожалуйста, помоги нам, чтобы мы были готовы, что мы служили Тебя, говорили другими про Тебя. Помоги нам, что мы все делали в Твое имя. И спасибо за все, что Ты нам дароваешь, Господи. Сохрани нас на достаточного этого дня и на неделю, Господи. Спасибо за все. Будь с нами, Отец, Сын и Дух Святой. Аминь.